He had always preferred a quiet life. His house stood at the edge of the town, surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently with the wind, casting moving shadows on the lawn. Few people ever noticed him, and he liked it that way. Every morning he would step out, stretch his arms toward the sky, and take a deep breath, feeling the calmness of the day. Neighbors waved occasionally, but there were no close friends or visitors. He enjoyed the silence, the freedom from unnecessary chatter, and the sense that his life belonged entirely to him. The house itself was simple, but well maintained. The paint on the walls was fresh, the garden was neatly trimmed, and the pathway to the front door was lined with small stones. Inside, everything had its place. He wasn't someone who needed luxury to feel content. A comfortable chair by the window, a small kitchen, and a few shelves of books were all he required. He liked the smell of coffee brewing in the morning, sound of birds outside, and the way the sun fell across his living room in the afternoon. It was a simple life, but it was a good life. Most people who passed by might have thought he was just another quiet man, perhaps retired or working at a regular job. They would never have guessed the depth of his past, the skills he had, or the experiences that had shaped him. That part of his life had been left behind years ago, tucked away carefully, only remembered in brief moments when he allowed himself to think back. He didn't talk about it. He didn't show it. It was a chapter he had closed, and he preferred to leave it there. Each day followed a rhythm. He would wake up early, make his coffee, and sit by the window watching the neighborhood slowly come alive. Children would play on the streets, neighbors would chat over fences, and the mailman would arrive right on schedule. He found comfort in the predictability, in the small signs of life moving forward. After his morning routine, he would tend to small tasks around the house, fixing things that needed attention or improving something that caught his eye. There was satisfaction in this work, a quiet pride in seeing the results of his own hands. Despite the calm, there was always an alertness about him. His eyes would sweep across the horizon even as he sipped his coffee, noting every movement. It wasn't paranoia. It was awareness. Years of experience had taught him to notice things that most people overlooked, to recognize patterns and anticipate outcomes. He carried this quietly, blending it into his everyday life, so it never felt like a burden, only a natural part of who he was. People in the neighborhood often wondered why he didn't socialize more. Invitations to barbecues or local gatherings were politely declined, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a simple nod. He preferred observing life from a distance rather than being at its center. There was no loneliness in his solitude. Instead, there was peace. He liked the feeling that his home was a sanctuary, a place where he could think, reflect, and be himself without outside pressures. He enjoyed small adventures too, though they were quiet ones. A morning walk in the nearby woods, a drive along empty country roads, or simply sitting by the lake watching the ripples of water in the afternoon. These moments were his way of connecting with the world without the noise and chaos that often came with human interactions. He appreciated the little things, the scent of rain on the soil, the rustle of leaves, the distant sound of an owl at dusk. His neighbors, though they didn't know him well, respected him. There was something in the way he carried himself that commanded quiet acknowledgement. He was polite, never intrusive, and always ready to lend a hand when necessary. Yet most people sensed there was more beneath the surface, something unspoken that set him apart. Children were naturally curious, but kept their distance, sensing the calm but firm presence he exuded. Adults would smile and wave, but rarely ventured into deeper conversation. He was friendly enough, but firmly private, inside his home. His life was filled with routines and habits that made each day meaningful. He loved reading books about history, strategy, and adventure, immersing himself in stories that challenged his mind. He would listen to music softly in the background while preparing meals, enjoying the way simple melodies could change the atmosphere. Even mundane chores were performed with care. Folding clothes, cleaning surfaces, organizing tools were small acts that brought a sense of order and control. Despite the simplicity, there was an edge to his life. He maintained his physical strength and mental sharpness through daily exercises, routines that kept him ready for anything if necessary. These were quiet, disciplined practices, push-ups, stretching, running through the backyard, sometimes shadow boxing. He did them privately, not for show, but for personal upkeep. This discipline was part of who he was, a reminder that the world could change in an instant, and one needed to be prepared. On weekends, he occasionally visited the local market, blending in effortlessly among the crowd. He would pick fresh vegetables, maybe a loaf of bread, and sometimes engage in brief conversation with vendors. These interactions were brief but meaningful. They allowed him to connect without losing his privacy. He appreciated the rhythm of ordinary life, the small kindnesses exchanged, and the simple acknowledgments that everyone was trying their best in their own way. Evenings were his favorite. The sun would dip low, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. He would sit on the porch, sometimes with a cup of tea, sometimes just in silence, listening to the world winding down. Occasionally, a neighbor's dog would bark, a car would pass, or the wind would carry a distant sound. But mostly, there was tranquility. He had learned to enjoy these quiet moments, to let the day settle within him before resting for the night. There were times when memories of the past would surface, moments he had long kept buried. The training, the missions, the pressure, and the responsibility all came rushing back in flashes. But he never let them disturb the calm of his present life. Instead, he acknowledged them, respected them, and then set them aside. They were a part of him, but they did not define the peaceful life he had carefully built. Sometimes, he thought about how different life could have been. The adrenaline, the danger, the constant uncertainty of the past were exciting but exhausting. Now, each day brought a sense of security and control that he valued immensely. He didn't need recognition or glory. He only needed to feel safe, to feel free, and to know that he could face whatever came his way if necessary. He had a sense of humor, quiet but sharp. He would notice little ironies in life, subtle things that made him smile, a misplaced tool, a bird attempting to carry something too heavy, a neighbor's cat getting itself stuck in an awkward position, all small moments that brought lightness to his day. Laughter, even quietly to himself, was a release, a way to balance the seriousness he carried inside. Despite the calm exterior, he knew the world could be unpredictable. People were unpredictable. Circumstances could change in an instant. But he felt ready for it not because he wanted trouble, but because he understood life, understood the patterns, and understood himself. That awareness brought confidence, and confidence allowed him to live without fear, even while remaining alert. The quiet life, however, was not boring. There was richness in the simplicity, depth in the routines, and a sense of fulfillment in the control he exercised over his surroundings. Each day was meaningful, each task purposeful, and each moment an opportunity to observe, reflect, and grow. He had discovered a balance that few could understand, the combination of calm, discipline, and awareness that made him resilient without isolating him completely from the world. Neighbors occasionally tried to engage him more deeply, asking about his past or inviting him to community events. He would smile and politely decline or give a brief, non-revealing answer. He didn't lie, but he didn't volunteer information either. He had learned long ago that privacy was not secrecy. It was a way to protect oneself and others, and in his experience it had kept him safe. The man living in that quiet house was more than he appeared. The calm, disciplined, and private life he led was deliberate, a careful choice after years of chaos and responsibility in his past. Every movement, every habit, every glance was informed by experience, awareness, and patience. He had become a master of blending in, of observing without being noticed, and of living fully while remaining unseen. As the night approached, he would often sit quietly in the living room, a soft lamp casting warm light across the furniture. He would read, think, or simply listen to the world outside. The wind, the occasional passing car, the distant bark of a dog, all part of the environment he had chosen and maintained. Sleep came naturally, untroubled by fears or regrets, because he had built a life that was in harmony with himself and the world around him. this quiet life, he found satisfaction, peace, and a sense of purpose. The house, the trees, the garden, the routines, they were more than objects or actions. They were expressions of control, stability, and choice. He was content, not because life had been easy, but because he had learned how to navigate it wisely, how to find calm amid uncertainty, and how to live fully without needing to be seen by the world. Little did anyone know, this calm, ordinary man carried within him skills, knowledge, experience that could change the course of events in ways most people could never imagine. But for now, he lived quietly, appreciating the simple pleasures of life, aware of the world, but not needing to confront it yet ready, always ready should the need arise. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, he noticed unusual activity near his house. At first it was subtle, a group of figures moving across the street, whispers carried by the wind, a sense of tension in the air. He didn't panic, but his senses sharpened. Years of experience had taught him to recognize when something was off, even before it fully revealed itself. He observed from his porch, silent and watchful. As shadows lengthened and the street grew quiet except for the faintest of sounds, the group consisted of several men. Their expressions hardened and their movements aggressive. It quickly became clear that they weren't just wandering. They had come with a purpose. As he watched, they approached his property, moving deliberately, breaking small branches, thralling stones, and scanning the area as if looking for something. His mind cataloged every detail, the number of people, their positions, the items they carried, even the way they interacted with each other. Every tiny action told a story, and he listened carefully. He remembered the feeling of calm from his quiet life, the comfort of the routines he had built, but he also recognized the need for action. This wasn't an ordinary situation. This was dangerous. He didn't want to escalate unnecessarily, but he had to protect his home and his life. He quietly moved inside, closing the doors and windows without making a sound, ensuring that he had the advantage of observation without exposure. From a vantage point near the kitchen window, he could see them more clearly. The men were loud now, shouting, laughing, and throwing objects toward his property. They smashed a small fence, overturned a garbage can, and kicked at his garden tools. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, shocked and fearful, but none dared to intervene. The man remained calm, studying their behavior. Each act of aggression revealed weaknesses, patterns, and the impulsiveness of the group. He knew he had to anticipate their next move. Years of preparation had trained him to read intentions and predict outcomes. This wasn't just physical, it was strategic. He noticed how they communicated with gestures, how some seemed more dominant while others hesitated. That hesitation, he realized, could be exploited. But he also knew that patience was key. Rushing into a confrontation would only increase risk. He breathed steadily, keeping his mind clear, allowing his instincts to guide him. The gang continued their destruction, unaware of the man's presence. He had seen enough to know that calling the authorities immediately was necessary, but he also knew they might arrive too late. There was a delicate balance between waiting and acting. He chose to observe a little longer, ensuring he understood the full scope of the threat. Every step he took, every movement he made, was calculated to avoid revealing his awareness. He had trained for situations like this, though not exactly like this. It was a reminder of how unpredictable life could be, how ordinary days could shift into chaos without warning. But experience gave him confidence. His hands moved slowly and deliberately, checking that doors were locked, windows secured, and potential escape routes clear. It wasn't fear driving him. It was preparation. He had faced worse in the past, and he had survived. This, he knew, would not be different. The group began targeting larger items, pulling apart the garden furniture and throwing it into the yard. A neighbor's fence post was snapped in half, and the sound of splintering wood echoed through the quiet evening. He could feel the anger rising in him, but he kept it under control. Anger was not a tool. Calmness and strategy were. He allowed them to exhaust themselves, knowing that impatience was their weakness. The longer he observed, the more mistakes they would make. Suddenly, one of them noticed a window slightly ajar and shouted to the others. They were becoming bolder, more reckless. That was the opening he needed. But he did not act with haste. Instead, he prepared for multiple contingencies. He moved silently to a secure corner of the house, ensuring that he could respond to any approach from any angle. He checked the surrounding area once more, noting the street layout, potential hiding spots, and any possible reinforcements the gang might have. Time seemed to stretch. The gang wasted energy arguing among themselves, deciding what to destroy next. Their loud voices carried, mixing with the distant chirping of birds and the faint hum of a passing car. It was almost surreal to witness such chaos in what was normally a peaceful neighborhood. He recognized the tension building within them, the overconfidence that often comes from assuming they were in control. That overconfidence would be their undoing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he made a decision. He would confront the situation, but not with brute force alone. He relied on strategy, misdirection, and the element of surprise. He quietly retrieved essential items from his home, things that could help him control the encounter without causing unnecessary harm. Every motion was precise, controlled, and deliberate. He moved like someone who had rehearsed countless scenarios. Even if this one was unique, the gang had now focused on a larger object in the yard, oblivious to his movements inside the house. He positioned himself where he could monitor them fully, ensuring that he had cover and a tactical advantage. The adrenaline was present, but contained. He had long learned that true control comes from composure, not frenzy. As he watched, he noticed their body language shifting. They were becoming frustrated, unsure, and impatient. Those emotions would be key to resolving the situation in his favor. He remembered the quiet moments of his past. The mornings with coffee, the afternoons in the garden, the evenings watching the sunset. Those memories provided strength, grounding him in the calm of the present. He drew on that calmness, using it to steady his thoughts and focus his attention. Every detail mattered: the sound of footsteps on gravel, the direction of a shout, the glint of a metallic object in their hands. Nothing escaped him. He realized that this was a test, not of strength alone, but of patience, perception, and judgment. Acting too soon could escalate the situation. Waiting too long could allow the damage to worsen. He had to strike a balance, and he trusted his instincts. He had survived countless challenges before, and this would be no different. The principles he had lived, by observation, strategy, calmness, were all he needed. Minutes passed. The gang grew restless. One of them attempted to climb over the fence, but stumbled. Another kicked at the garden gate, only to have it resist and snap back, startling him. Small mistakes compounded, creating openings for him to respond if needed. He remained hidden, observing, calculating, and waiting for the precise moment to assert control without unnecessary risk. He thought about the neighbors who were silently watching, fearful yet unable to act. He wanted to protect them, not just from the immediate threat, but from witnessing something worse. That sense of responsibility, combined with years of training, allowed him to maintain composure. He knew that panic would only fuel the aggressors, and that calmness could shift the balance in his favor. Suddenly, the gang decided to move on to more aggressive measures. They began throwing heavier objects, smashing more furniture, and even attempting to breach the house. He realized that the window of opportunity was closing. His plan had to move from observation to action. He positioned himself where he could control the environment, anticipating their approach and preparing to use the advantages he had identified during his careful surveillance. As he prepared, he also considered alternatives. He didn't want to hurt anyone unnecessarily. The goal was to end the threat, protect his home, and ensure the gang understood that their actions had consequences. He remembered past lessons, recalling situations where restraint and intelligence had prevented disasters. Those lessons guided him now, blending experience with instinct, readiness with patience. The first gang member approached a broken section of the fence, attempting to enter the property. At that moment, he made a subtle, controlled movement that indicated awareness. But without revealing the full extent of his capability, the man froze, sensing something different. His hesitation caused confusion among the others. The advantage shifted and he capitalized on it, directing the situation without direct confrontation yet, simply by leveraging perception, awareness, and timing. As the group debated their next move, he quietly ensured that all exits were secure, that the surroundings favored him, and that he had clear escape routes if needed. Every detail mattered. The tension grew, the air charged with uncertainty. The gang's overconfidence was eroding, replaced by caution and suspicion. That subtle shift in their mindset was crucial. It provided him with the leverage to guide the situation toward resolution without escalating into chaos. He took a deep breath, centering himself. The evening sky darkened, shadows deepened, and the quiet neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. He was ready, not because he wanted conflict, but because he understood responsibility, preparation, and consequence. He was a man shaped by experience, disciplined by training, and grounded by his calm nature. The world had thrown challenges at him before. He had learned to respond with clarity, precision, and control. The gang remained unaware of the full extent of his presence. They assumed intimidation and numbers were enough. They did not know that the man they targeted was someone whose skills and mindset could change the outcome in moments. That ignorance gave him the edge. He moved silently, positioning himself strategically, prepared to guide events with minimal risk but maximum effect. The quiet life he cherished was about to be defended, not through chaos, but through awareness, preparation, and controlled action. Time slowed as he watched, considered, and planned. Every moment, every movement, every sound contributed to his understanding of the situation. He relied on instincts honed through years of disciplined training. The ability to read people, anticipate behavior, and act decisively when the moment arrived. It was a delicate dance. A balance between patience and act of the night was dark. But he moved with confidence, every step deliberate and quiet. He watched as the gang regrouped near the edge of his property, muttering to each other, their aggression turning to uncertainty. Their overconfidence had begun to crack, and he could sense their tension growing. Each movement they made was predictable because they didn't understand strategy, and he did. He observed their patterns, the way they paused before acting, the way their eyes darted nervously when something didn't go as planned. He had learned long ago that confrontation wasn't about force alone. It was about reading situations, understanding people, and waiting for the right moment. He wasn't going to rush in blindly. He would let them reveal their weaknesses. That patience had saved him countless times in the past, and it would serve him now. He checked all the surroundings, the windows, the garden, the side paths, making sure there were no surprises. Everything was under control, as it always had to be. The gang began to argue among themselves, frustrated at their lack of progress. One wanted to escalate, another wanted to retreat. Their voices were loud, but in the quiet night he could pick up every word. Their confusion and lack of coordination made them easy to anticipate. He smiled slightly to himself, not out of cruelty, but because he knew that preparation and calm thinking often outweighed reckless aggression. He had been trained to exploit such moments. Now he could. He quietly moved to a vantage point near the porch, unseen and undetected. From there he could monitor every action, every movement, and respond if necessary. He didn't want them to notice him yet. He wanted them to underestimate him, to believe that they controlled the situation. That illusion would make them careless, and carelessness could be corrected with minimal effort. He breathed slowly, maintaining the calm that was essential to thinking clearly and acting effectively. The gang, emboldened by their initial destruction, decided to split up. Some stayed near the yard, others wandered closer to the house, breaking small items as they went. He noted each position and each path. In his mind, he was mapping the scene, anticipating where they would move next, and preparing for every contingency. It was a mental exercise as much as a physical one. Every action, every choice, had to be calculated because one mistake could have consequences. He recalled the quiet mornings of his life, peaceful routines, the calmness he had worked so hard to maintain. That calmness gave him strength. It reminded him why he valued this life and why he needed to protect it. He wasn't seeking violence, but he wouldn't hesitate to defend himself or his home. Experience had taught him that preparation and awareness were the greatest weapons, and he relied on them completely. As the minutes passed, the gang's mistakes became more apparent. One tripped over a small stone, another knocked over a trash can, creating a loud noise that startled the rest. He noted their reactions carefully, seeing fear flicker in their eyes. Even in the midst of their aggression, the cracks in their composure were visible to him. He had spent years noticing these subtle signs, learning when to act and when to wait. Now he could see that moment approaching suddenly. One of the gang members moved toward the house with a crowbar, attempting to force open a side door. He saw it clearly, predicting the move before it happened. He positioned himself in a way that would allow him to intercept if necessary, but he didn't rush. Instead, he used subtle noises and shadows to create doubt in their minds. The man hesitated, uncertainty flashing across his face. The others, noticing the hesitation, paused as well. The balance of power had shifted. He thought about how the world often underestimated quiet people, how appearances could deceive, and how those who seemed ordinary might possess extraordinary skills. That lesson had been ingrained in him through years of training and experience. Now it was playing out before his eyes. The gang believed themselves to be in control, but they were walking into a situation they did not understand. He had the advantage, not through aggression, but through observation, patience, and knowledge. The gang's frustration grew. Their shouting became louder, more erratic, their coordination weaker. They didn't know how to handle uncertainty, and he did. He remained calm, his mind working through every possible scenario. He considered escape routes, points of entry, and the most effective way to neutralize the threat without unnecessary risk. He didn't want to escalate more than necessary, but he was prepared for anything. Discipline and preparation had always been his allies. He moved quietly, making small adjustments to his position. Each step was measured, ensuring that he could respond from any angle. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, but he didn't mind. Time was his ally. The gang's impatience, combined with their lack of understanding, gave him the upper hand. He could wait, observe, and act precisely when the opportunity presented itself. He noticed that some of them began to explore the edges of his property, thinking they could find something valuable or intimidating. He allowed them to wander, noting their weaknesses and tendencies. One man leaned too far over a fence and almost fell. Another tried to pry open a window with little success. Every error was a clue, a way to understand their behavior and predict their next actions. His mind cataloged everything, forming a clear picture of the situation and the best course of action. The quietness of his house, the peaceful life he had built, contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. It reminded him of what was at stake. This was more than property damage. It was about protecting the life he had carefully crafted. He valued his peace, his routines, and the sense of control he had over his environment. That life was worth defending, and he would do so intelligently and decisively. He also thought about the neighbors. Watching silently from behind curtains, unable to intervene. Their fear was palpable, and he felt a responsibility to protect them indirectly by controlling the situation. Experience had taught him that restraint and strategy often prevented unnecessary harm. Acting rashly could escalate matters, and he refused to allow that. He relied on observation, timing, and skill to handle the threat efficiently. As the gang continued their chaotic exploration, he noticed a few beginning to argue. Their frustration was spilling over, disagreements escalating. One wanted to confront the house directly, another insisted on taking valuables, while a third suggested retreat. Their lack of unity made them predictable. He could anticipate the outcomes of each decision before it happened. Their overconfidence, combined with poor judgment, made the situation favorable for him. He prepared to act subtly, using the environment to his advantage. He considered the layout of the yard, the objects around him, and the paths the gang would likely take. His actions would be calculated, precise, and minimal. He didn't need violence to assert control. He needed awareness, strategy, and psychological advantage. He had learned long ago that perception could be more powerful than force. Minutes passed as he watched, waited, and analyzed. Each member of the gang revealed their tendencies: the impatient, the cautious, the reckless. He cataloged these details, preparing for the moment when intervention would be necessary. He remained calm, knowing that his patience would yield the best results. Every noise, shadow, and movement was noted, contributing to a mental map of the unfolding situation. The gang grew bolder, moving closer to the house. One approached the front door, attempting to peer inside. He remained perfectly still, hidden from view, letting the tension build in their minds. Their uncertainty made them hesitant, their mistakes more frequent. The balance had shifted entirely, yet they didn't realize it. He had the advantage simply by remaining calm, observant, strategic. He thought about the discipline that had brought him to this point. Years of training, preparation, and experience allowed him to remain composed in moments when others would panic. That discipline wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, and strategic. He understood people, situations, and consequences. He knew when to act, when to wait, and when to let the moment dictate the outcome. As he considered his next move, he also acknowledged the unpredictability of humans. While he could anticipate behavior, there was always a degree of uncertainty. That uncertainty required constant vigilance, adaptability, and presence of mind. He was ready for anything because he had trained for it. He trusted his instincts, his experience, and his ability to remain calm under pressure. The gang's aggression began to wane as their mistakes piled up. They were confused, frustrated, and unsure. The tension that had driven their initial actions was now replaced by hesitation. He recognized the exact moment when they were vulnerable, when a subtle shift in perception could give him control without a direct confrontation. He positioned himself carefully, ready to assert that control precisely and efficiently. He remembered the quiet life he had built. The mornings with coffee, the afternoons in the garden, the evenings watching the sun set. Those moments grounded him, provided clarity, and reminded him of what he was protecting. That life was worth defending intelligently. He didn't seek conflict, but he was fully prepared to respond if necessary. Using every skill he had honed over years of experience, the gang was now directly in the yard, moving with caution, unaware of the full extent of his awareness. Their ignorance worked to his advantage. He had the tactical understanding, the preparation, and the patience. It was not brute strength that gave him control, but observation, anticipation, and mental discipline. Every decision they made played into his plan, and he used it to maintain an advantage without escalating unnecessarily. The night stretched on, the tension thick, but he remained calm. He knew that the right moment would come, a moment when the gang's own mistakes and uncertainty would create an opening. He would act then decisively to protect his home and restore order. Until that moment, he observed, analyzed, and waited, confident that his experience and calmness would gid. The tension in the night air was thick, and he could feel it pressing against him, though he remained calm. The gang's mistakes had piled up, their overconfidence evaporating into hesitation. They moved closer to the house, some carrying makeshift weapons, others trying to peek through the windows. Their fear was subtle but growing, and he could sense it in the way they spoke and moved. Every twitch, every pause, was a clue, and he read them like an open book. He quietly moved into position, using the shadows to remain unseen. His years of training had taught him to blend into the environment, to become almost invisible when necessary. Tonight, that skill was essential. He didn't want to confront them too early, but he also knew he couldn't wait indefinitely. Patience was critical, but timing would determine success. He scanned the yard, the surrounding fences, the nearby street, ensuring that there were no surprises. One of the gang members approached the front door, leaning over and attempting to open it with force. The man froze for a moment, sensing something wrong. He didn't know what, but instinct warned him that he was being watched. That hesitation created an opening. Quietly, the man positioned himself so that he could respond immediately if needed. He didn't shout or move recklessly. Instead, he prepared for the precise moment when the balance would shift in his favor. Another member wandered into the garden, searching for items to steal or destroy. He watched carefully, noting the positions and weaknesses of each individual. The group had no coordination now, no clear plan, only uncertainty and fear disguised as aggression. Every move they made confirmed what he had already suspected. Their recklessness was their greatest weakness. He had to act intelligently, not hastily. He thought about the responsibility that weighed on him. This was not just about property. It was about maintaining the safety of the neighborhood and protecting the life he had built. Neighbors watched silently, afraid to intervene. He felt their concern, and it strengthened his resolve. He was not here to punish. He was here to restore order, to protect what was his, and to prevent harm. That sense of purpose gave clarity to every decision he made. The gang began to panic. Realizing that their initial confidence had been misplaced, arguments broke out among them, voices rising in anger and fear. One wanted to escalate, another wanted to flee, and a third tried to assert control, but lacked the presence to do so effectively. He observed silently, knowing that their internal conflict made them predictable. Their mistakes were becoming more obvious, their coordination weaker, and that gave him the advantage. He recalled the quiet mornings and afternoons of his life, the routines that had kept him grounded. That calm, measured life was now contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. He didn't seek confrontation, but he was ready for it. He had trained for situations where calmness and strategy outweighed brute force. The same principles applied here. Observation, timing, and psychological awareness were as powerful as any weapon. Suddenly, one of the gang members made a sudden move toward a window, attempting to peek inside. He anticipated it instantly, positioning himself so that the individual would be confronted with his presence without unnecessary force. The man froze, sensing something was not right. That pause created confusion, and the others noticed, whispering anxiously to each other. The momentum had shifted. He controlled the situation simply by being aware, alert, and deliberate. He considered the next steps carefully. Each action had to be precise, minimal, and effective. He didn't need to escalate with violence. He only needed to assert presence and control. He had trained for years in tactical awareness, conflict resolution, and situational dominance. Every skill he possessed now served a single purpose: to end the threat efficiently and safely. The gang's uncertainty grew. One tried to lead an attack, but the others hesitated. Their coordination fell apart completely. He took a careful step, making a subtle sound that suggested he was moving closer. The group flinched, their confusion intensifying. He didn't shout or confront directly. He let their imagination fill in the blanks. Perception could be more powerful than reality, and he used that principle perfectly. Time seemed to stretch as he waited for the precise moment to act decisively. The gang, now panicked, began retreating slightly, unsure where to go. One of them tripped over a broken piece of furniture, and a loud crash echoed through the yard. Another shouted, blaming someone else for the noise. That chaos gave him control. He knew exactly how to guide them toward the outcome he wanted, simply by remaining calm and observant. He moved slowly and deliberately, positioning himself where he could respond to any movement. He considered all possible scenarios: their aggression, their fear, their attempts to flee. Each possibility had a response prepared. His preparation was meticulous, ensuring that he could maintain safety while asserting authority. He relied on observation, timing, and presence rather than rash action. His calmness was his strength. The gang members began to scatter slightly, unsure of where to go, afraid of what they could not see. He allowed them space, controlling the situation without physical confrontation. Their fear grew, and he sensed their morale breaking. He had achieved a psychological advantage, a quiet but powerful control over the unfolding events. That was exactly what he intended. He thought about the neighbors who were watching in silence, their fear evident. He felt responsibility not only for his home but for the community. His calm, strategic approach prevented unnecessary harm, both to the gang and to anyone who might get caught in the chaos. That responsibility guided every decision, every movement, every consideration. Suddenly, one of the gang members made a more aggressive move, attempting to kick open a side gate. He reacted instantly, moving with precision, ensuring that the individual was confronted with the awareness of his presence without causing harm. The man froze completely, panic setting in, and the others hesitated. The moment of control had arrived. He could assert authority without violence simply through presence, awareness, and strategic positioning. He observed carefully, anticipating each movement. The gang's overconfidence was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. Their mistakes were now obvious, and he could direct them toward retreat without escalating further. His preparation and experience allowed him to act with minimal risk, maximum effect. He was in full control, using calmness and strategic thinking as his primary tools. He reflected briefly on his quiet life, the simple pleasures that had kept him grounded. Those moments of peace were worth defending, and he was prepared to do so intelligently. He did not seek confrontation, but he was fully ready for it. His discipline, awareness, and experience were all aligned to protect his home, his life, and the surrounding community. He trusted himself to manage the situation effectively. As the night deepened, the gang's coordination collapsed completely. They argued, shouted, and stumbled over each other. Panic replaced confidence, and he could sense the exact moment to guide them toward retreat. Every movement was deliberate. Every observation counted. He remained calm, steady, and in control, aware that the resolution depended on timing, perception, and strategy. He made a subtle shift, a small movement that indicated awareness without aggressive confrontation. The gang members froze, realizing they were being watched, unsure of the extent of his capabilities. Fear replaced aggression, and the balance had shifted completely. He had achieved psychological control, a state where his presence alone dictated the gang's actions. That was the outcome he had been waiting for. Slowly, methodically, the gang began to retreat. Their movements were hesitant, unsure, and careful. He guided them subtly, ensuring that they left without escalating the situation further. He maintained awareness of every step, anticipating possible reactions and preparing to respond if necessary. The balance was delicate, but he had mastered it through years of disciplined training. The quiet life he valued had been threatened, but his calm, strategic response ensured that it was preserved. The gang, now fully aware of their disadvantage, scattered into the night. He remained in position for a few moments, confirming that the threat had ended. The yard was quiet again, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a passing car. He had maintained control without unnecessary violence. Protecting his home and the community, he exhaled slowly, allowing the tension to leave his body. The night had tested his skills, his patience, and his judgment. He had observed, analyzed, and acted precisely, ensuring a safe resolution. His calm, deliberate approach had turned potential chaos into control. He knew that the quiet life he cherished was secure, at least for now, and that his discipline and experience had once again proven their value as he returned to the house. Reflected on the events. The confrontation had not required force, only awareness, strategy, and calm. That was the essence of his life: preparation, observation, and measured action. The night had reinforced his belief that intelligence and discipline often outweigh aggression and recklessness. He had defended his home, preserved his peace, and ensured safety for those around him all, without unnecessary harm. It was a quiet victory, but one that mattered deeply. The night had finally quieted, leaving only the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant hum of cars passing by. He stood in his yard, surveying the aftermath. Broken furniture, scattered tools, and trampled plants marked the path of the gang's intrusion. He felt a mixture of anger and calm anger at the destruction, in knowing that no one had been harmed and that the situation had been controlled. He moved slowly through the yard, examining every detail, ensuring there were no hidden dangers left behind. Every object, every footprint, every movement of the night had been accounted for in his mind. He thought about how quickly chaos could arise in ordinary life. One moment the neighborhood was quiet and peaceful, and the next, a group of people had decided to invade it with aggression. It reminded him that the world could be unpredictable, that appearances could be deceiving, and that preparedness was essential. He had lived his life understanding this principle, and it had served him well tonight. His calmness and awareness had prevented what could have been a dangerous escalation. As the first hints of dawn appeared, he reflected on the people who lived nearby. Neighbors had been frightened, watching from their windows, unsure if they should intervene. They had been relieved that the situation ended without violence, though they likely did not understand how much control had been exerted behind the scenes. He knew that his response had protected not just his home, but the sense of safety in the community. That responsibility weighed on him quietly, and he accepted it without complaint. The memory of his past, the years of training, his discipline, and experience played through his mind. It was a life that few could comprehend, a life that had taught him patience, strategy, and composure under pressure. Those lessons had allowed him to navigate the night successfully. He had relied on observation, timing, and understanding of human behavior, rather than brute force. The skills he had acquired had ensured that his peaceful life remained undisturbed by those who sought to disrupt it. He began repairing some of the damage, moving furniture back into place, picking up broken items, and clearing debris. Even in small actions, he maintained care and precision. It was important not only to restore his home physically, but also mentally, to reclaim the sense of control and peace that had been threatened. Each task, though simple, reinforced his calm and helped him process the events of the night. He knew that restoration was as much about mindset as it was about objects. Neighbors cautiously stepped outside as daylight brightened, assessing the scene for themselves. They were relieved, curious, and perhaps a little awed. Some approached him, offering tentative words of thanks or concern, but he responded with quiet nods and polite smiles. He did not need recognition. His actions had been enough. The gratitude of the community, though appreciated, was secondary to the knowledge that he had ensured their safety and his own. That sense of responsibility was deeply ingrained. He carried it with humility. He reflected on the contrast between the chaos of the night and the quiet life he cherished. One evening, a neighborhood filled with laughter, routine, and peaceful activities. The next, a small group of intruders had attempted to disrupt that balance. Yet, by relying on calm, preparation, and strategy, he had restored equilibrium without harming anyone. It was a reminder that true strength often lay not in confrontation, but in control, observation, and understanding. Throughout the morning, he continued to assess his property. He checked the security of doors and windows, repaired minor damage, and made plans for further improvements. Though the immediate threat had passed, he understood the importance of ongoing vigilance. Life could be unpredictable, and maintaining awareness was essential. These actions were part of his routine, part of the disciplined life he had built over the years. They were not burdens, but choices he embraced willingly. As he worked, he thought about the lessons the night had reinforced. People could act recklessly, driven by fear, anger, or ignorance. Yet, those situations could be navigated effectively with preparation, patience, and understanding. He realized that many in his community might never encounter such threats. But the principles he relied on were universal. Awareness, strategy, and calmness could prevent or resolve conflicts of all kinds. Later, as neighbors began their day, he noticed a few offering assistance with repairs or cleanup. He accepted some help, quietly appreciating the sense of community that emerged after fear. The interaction was simple and natural, reinforcing bonds without creating dependence. He understood the balance between privacy and connection, maintaining boundaries while engaging respectfully with others. The night's events had reminded him that such connections, however subtle, were valuable. He paused for a moment, taking in the morning light, the calmness of the neighborhood, and the resilience of the small community. Despite the chaos of the previous night, life continued. Children played, birds sang, and routines resumed. It was a reminder of the continuity of life and the importance of maintaining peace and stability. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his actions had preserved that continuity. Reflecting further, He considered how his past experiences had shaped his approach. Years of rigorous training, discipline, understanding of human behavior had not only prepared him for dangerous situations, but had also taught him the value of patience and observation. Those lessons allowed him to act decisively when necessary and to remain calm when others might panic. It was a balance that few could achieve, and it had made the difference tonight. He also thought about the intruders. Their aggression had been fueled by prejudice and ignorance. He did not dwell on anger, but rather on the opportunity to demonstrate the importance of awareness and preparation. They had underestimated him, and that miscalculation had ensured their failure. In a way, the night had been a lesson not only for him, but for anyone observing. Appearances could be deceiving, and calm, prepared individuals often held the true advantage. As he continued his work, he felt a sense of renewal. The night's challenges had tested his skills, patience, and composure, and he had succeeded. That success reinforced the value of his disciplined life, importance of his routines, and the strength found in calm observation. He knew that challenges would arise again, but he also knew that his approach would continue to serve him well. Preparation, awareness, and controlled action were timeless tools. The neighborhood began to settle fully into the day. Normal activities resumed, the sounds of work, conversation, and play filling the air. He moved through his yard methodically, ensuring everything was restored. The process was quiet, almost meditative, allowing him to reflect further on the events and on the principles that guided his life. Even in repair and cleanup, there was purpose, discipline, meaning. He thought about the future, the need for continued vigilance, and the ways he could further secure his home and life. These considerations were not driven by fear, but by understanding. Life could be unpredictable, but preparedness and awareness provided stability. That knowledge was empowering, allowing him to continue his quiet, disciplined life without compromise. He valued the balance between calm and readiness, privacy and community. Asterisk. As the day progressed, he felt a renewed appreciation for the peaceful life he had cultivated. The events of the night had reminded him of its fragility, but also of its worth. He had defended it not through recklessness, but through skill, awareness, and composure. That balance was the essence of his existence, living fully, calmly, and prepared for the unexpected. Evening approached, and he settled briefly on his porch, watching the neighborhood return to its quiet rhythm. Children's laughter, the soft sounds of birds, and the distant hum of cars reminded him that life continued, resilient and enduring. He felt a sense of fulfillment and quiet pride, knowing that he had preserved that rhythm. The night's events would fade from memory for most, but the lessons and the success of his actions would remain. He reflected on how ordinary people might underestimate those who appeared quiet or reserved. The contrast between his calm demeanor and the skills he possessed highlighted a truth he had long understood. Appearances could deceive, and true capability often remained hidden. That insight shaped his interactions, his choices, and his approach to life. Tonight, it had ensured safety, order, and control. Finally, as the sun set and the day transitioned into evening, he felt a deep sense of peace. The intruders had been dealt with, the community was safe, and his home was secure. He'd acted with intelligence, patience, and skill, demonstrating the value of observation, preparedness, and composure. Life, he knew, would continue to present challenges, but he was confident in his ability to meet them. He stood quietly, breathing in the evening air, and appreciated the world around him. The night's events had tested him, but they had also reinforced the principles that guided his life. Awareness, strategy, calmness, and discipline were not just tools for survival, they were tools for living fully and meaningfully. He had proven that tonight, in a quiet but powerful way. As darkness fully settled, he returned inside, closing the doors and windows, securing the home once more. The night was over, and peace had returned. He reflected on the events, the lessons learned, and the quiet strength that had guided him. In the stillness, he felt gratitude, not for recognition, but for the ability to live a life defined by preparation, calm, and control. The quiet life he cherished remained intact, preserved by his vigilance, skill, and thoughtful action. And with that, he settled in for rest, ready to continue his life with renewed appreciation for both its peace and its fragility.